Hi, I'm 8mm Mauser Man. Have you ever seen one of these before? This is a Weaver Qwikpoint. The Weaver Qwikpoint was one of the first red dots that was ever commercially available on the market. And today I would like to show you mine. But before we do that, let's shoot it just a little bit. And today I have it mounted on my Remington 1187 Police. A police shotgun is not really its intended use, but it'll get the job done. Like I said, the Weaver Qwikpoint is one of the earliest red dots on the open market. It was released in either late 1970 or early 1971. Now, a modern red dot, like what I have on my handgun right here, uses a battery and it's electronic. However, the Weaver Qwikpoint is not electronic. It uses something like a fiber optic cable inside of it. The reason I say something like a fiber optic cable is because in their advertising material, they don't actually say it's a fiber optic cable. It probably is, and that's the job it's doing, to display a point inside of there, just like a conventional red dot. So it looks just like a conventional red dot when you're looking through it. Now, the Weaver Qwikpoint was advertised for close range, sporting and hunting use for both rifles and shotguns. We'll talk more about the models in a little bit. In my experience, it was not advertised for tactical use. However, that's not to say that it was not used in that sense. I found an article from an old Soldier of Fortune magazine where somebody had a Weaver Qwikpoint mounted on top of a .22 long rifle, fully automatic American 180. Now that's an incredibly interesting use for this red dot. In my opinion, this would not be the best for tactical use because it takes in light and then uses that light to display itself on a screen. If you're outside, you'll be able to see it perfectly fine as long as it's not pitch black. However, if you're using it in an urban setting, you'll really struggle in certain situations. Because if you're in a situation where you're not taking in as much light as you're shooting into, you will really struggle to pick up that red dot. So, in my experience, if I'm inside of my dark garage looking into my house with this red dot, I really struggle to see the dot if I can see it at all. However, if I am in the lit room looking into a dark space, I can see it perfectly fine. If you're a police officer and you're trying to shoot out of a window, you might be in a dark room, but the space you're shooting to is well lit by the sun. So that's a major downside of this type of optic. Now, looking at ads in 1970 and 1971, I saw advertisements for two of the models, the S1 and the R1. Then in 1972, I started seeing the R22 introduced. And then in 1974, I started seeing the S-1100, the model I have right here, introduced. The difference between the four models is only in the mounting. The model, the S1, is designed to have a 45-degree mount where you drill and tap the shotgun receiver at the top right here, and then you mount it to the shotgun directly. And this is the model that is the cheapest today because that mounting method did not take off. So unless you specifically want to mate that optic onto a shotgun, you aren't really going to be doing that particular modification. Then the R1 uses a Weaver rail and it fits most Picatinny rails. I don't want to say all because there's always some bizarre exception. The R22 uses the most common dovetail that you'll see on rimfire rifles. And that one is the one that I have never actually seen for sale. I check YouTube pretty regularly for these because I think they're interesting. The R1100, the S1100 I see pretty frequently. The other ones I see sometimes. However, the R22 I pretty rarely see. And then finally, the S1100 was released the latest from what I can tell. And it uses the pinholes on a Remington 870 or an Remington 1100, like this 1187, to mount it directly to the rifle. It mounts through the pinholes for the trigger, and the rifle or the shotgun still works perfectly. Now, what do I think that this would be best for? I think that if you have a rifle or a shotgun that you are going to use specifically outside, you aren't going to use it for home defense or anything like that, I think one of these might actually be pretty nice. If I find a really cheap 870 that I'm going to use for like clays and that kind of thing, I think mounting this optic on it would make a lot of sense, since the only time I'm really going to be using that is in broad daylight when I am in a very well-lit setting. The interesting thing is that this technology is still used today. My friend bought this SIG P320. Please be praying for his thighs.
Dude, we're
gotta drop the load! And the 320 came with a Trijicon RMR on the top, and this particular RMR is one of the kinds that has a fiber optic cable that lets light inside of the red dot. So even this modern handgun uses that same style of illumination. And if you're familiar with the Trijicon ACOG as well as some other Trijicon optics, this is a pretty common method still used today to some degree. I think that's really interesting. Now, I'm 8mm Mauser Man, and my Weaver Qwik Point is loose, so I'm done shooting. But I lived on. Easy. You be the judge. That was way more explosion than I expected. Keep the change, you filthy animal.